Three, two, and one. Hello, my people, my people. Welcome back to another amazing and fabulous show. Today, we have a very charming and wonderful guest that I am pleased to be talking to today. He is great indeed. He is very well respected from around the world. He has done some great things in his lifetime, has traveled many places. He has contributed to articles on health service management, to medical and related presses. Um, this particular individual is from Lincolnshire in England. Uh, Henry VIII has, in fact, called it the most boorish county of our realm. He's been lavishly entertained at Dorton Abbey at the northeastern uh, extreme of the county and had been in the Humber uh, estuary. And I know I have butchered that word quite frankly. So do bear with me as I continue to read this further. So Kurt spent his childhood and adolescence there. So he was helped with his writing by liberal poet Henry Trace and Father Wardrow Jude. So he definitely has put in quite a bit of work in his time, and he later spent some time doing some work in medicine, about 8 years of management or replacement in the psychiatric ward by the community mental health services in North London. Um, he became a cook. He has traveled around Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, and the U.S. of A. As I mentioned about his travels, he writes about places he traveled. He has wrote about five books that we will talk each about. I definitely want to give Colin, Kurt, who is the person that I'm talking about, respectively, the opportunity to tell you about his experience in full. So, without further ado, let's just bring on Colin Kurt. So, how you doing today, sir?
Okay, well, that is a introduction to me, which I can't do anything other than expand on a bit. Um, North Lincolnshire is a very rural sort of area, which is where I was brought up and did some farm labouring and that kind of thing. But after that, I went to Edinburgh University, and I spent 4 years in the capital of Scotland, which is a very, very beautiful city. And in fact, Bronze, which is the novel that we're talking about mainly, is set partly in Edinburgh and partly in Florence. And all the Edinburgh parts of it, in fact, go back to the time when I lived there, which is many years ago now, because the book is actually set in the 1970s, and it endeavours to portray the life of a young Scotsman who then embarks on a long summer holiday in Italy, and it's all his exploits while he was in Italy. Other books that I have written are mainly to do with sacred places. I get an enormous amount of pleasure out of visiting sacred places, like the sacred remains in Delphi, which is where the Delphi remains of the Python are very, very famous. And I've actually been in the Python's cave, which you can't go into now because it's all sealed off. And I've been to the Sacred Mountain in Jerusalem, and all the sacred places that are reasonably easily accessible from my part of the world, including Samarkand, which is one of the most amazing places I've been to. But I go to them because I like the vibes that are there. I like getting the experience of being in a place where a lot of other folks have been and enjoyed the experience of being somewhere totally, totally unique. The only one that seems to me to be close to heaven is Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which is the most extraordinary place because it is a flat space the size of about 4 football fields, and you cannot see over the edge unless you're standing near the edge. So you seem to be floating in the heavens. It's a superb experience. The other books I've written are mainly on poets and poetry, and I have written quite a lot of poetry. And a couple of my books are on religious subjects, and I've also written one called Aiden's Goldfish, which is an account of 9/11 from a very precise historical point of view. Otherwise, I'm still a cook. I still have a vegetarian restaurant and cook for it, and people still come and eat our food, so it can't be too bad. Okay.
So yeah, this is very, I find all of that very fascinating, and it just seems like you have immersed yourself in the fullness of life itself, and then your writing is reflective of it, and it's just every bit of the travel has been it's been a drip drop uh, in each of the writing. Uh, for example, in life in poetry, as we begin to uh, look at that a bit, uh, you begin to talk about the bit of the influence of this book as uh, it is obvious in the poetry of this you know the from your travels and the mount the Temple Mount, um going back to Egypt, so
Well, one of the most amazing things to me was when we were in the temple at Abydos in Egypt, when in fact I saw a little spot of light go up one side of a wall, and it was going to shine directly down on what had been the Pharaoh's throne. And I sat on it and said to my partner, take a photograph of me when a spot of light drops on my head. And she did, and there's actually a copy of the photograph is in Life in Poetry, because it just shows my head covered in a gold mask. And then the spot of light went off again. And I had no idea, but that actually happens only on Midsummer's Day, and we happen to be there on Midsummer's Day. It happens at midday on Midsummer's Day. And I couldn't understand how it was possible to have a hole in a piece of rock fine enough to do that, because it hadn't got blocked by sand over the centuries. But it worked, and it was very interesting. I'm always on the lookout for things that are different and try and find some logical explanation to them. And usually you can, but not always. And that's what I think is interesting about sacred places, that other people have had the experience, and the vibes keep around there.
Yeah. So why is it you think people don't, care anymore, and why people don't, write on things, or don't allow for their writing to be so reflective on things like that, as though you were able to do, and how are you able to switch it on like that?
Well, as I switch it on, I think that most of my time I go around with my eyes open, and I don't spend all my time looking at screens, which I think is the problem nowadays. There are so many diversions that commercial powers and the state put in front of you to not give you the time to just see what's around and what's so delightful and wonderful in nature and in life generally. I mean, it bothers me that any time you do anything nowadays, you're asked 10 minutes later if you'll evaluate it. I mean, who could care less what you or I think about some hotel or boat or God knows what, when there's all sorts of amazing things to see that are free, and they don't get appreciated properly, they don't get written about enough.
Yeah,
I think it's
I really think that
um,
you capture, what, what is really missing, uh, from from this modern society, rather than just, the romantic, romantic watered down, poetry that we often so accustomed to. And it, it's so much more deeper than that, and we often don't allow ourselves to, get in touch with our spiritual side. And it seems like had more of a deep spiritual immersion, when you had all these travels. Is it fair to say?
I think it's a lot to do with how you're brought up and the people that teach you. Because, I mean, you mentioned at the beginning Henry Treece, who was a very well-known English poet in the 50s, 60s of last century. I was fortunate enough to be taught by him from the age of 11 to 18. So all my knowledge of English literature and the English language really goes back to Henry Treece. He was somebody who he was just totally enthralled by everything that was going on around him, and you pick this up from the person. Whereas if you speak to school teachers at the moment, it's very sad because many of them would love to teach like that, but in fact they're given curricula that they're supposed to follow, and quite a lot of the education these days is on screen, and it's already been worked out by some educationalists in my case in Paris, but in the Ministry of Education of whatever country you're in. It doesn't allow that flexible relationship between a teacher and the student that encourages an individual approach. And I think it's very sad that we've agreed, because it's a democracy, we do allow these things to happen, that we've agreed to education being absolutely by rote and no longer exploratory and full of excitement and all the things that life should be about.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It was definitely different in, in more traditional times. Uh, Things are becoming less and less traditional now, and homeschool definitely seems like a better option if you want to be removed from, what has turned. So we see sort of what, what has sort of this bit of a conversion. Speaking of conversions, talk to us a little bit about the death of Augustus, his conversion to Christ. There was a bit of a switch with Augustus too. He had a bit of change of mind.
Well, the amazing thing, I read that book in 2014 because that was supposed to be the 2000th anniversary of the death of Augustus.
Yes.
I'd always been very intrigued about a poem of Ovid's where he claims that he's writing it immediately after the death of Augustus, and he does that in a very complicated way. Tell you what year it was, and it was 8 AD, it wasn't 14 AD.
Right.
The reason that Augustus is supposed to have died in 14 AD is because somebody wrote at the beginning of one of the books of the New Testament, Luke, I think, that Tiberius had been emperor for 30 years, I think it was, when Jesus started preaching. And if you worked backwards, it meant, because they knew when Tiberius had been emperor, that Augustus must have died in 14 instead of in 8. But the only absolute record left of when he died is the one that Ovid wrote, because all the literature of the period when Augustus was in power was destroyed by the Christians when they got to power 500 years later. They didn't want to know. They didn't want anybody to know that Augustus had been called the Son of God, that he was the Prince of Peace, and all the titles that they'd passed on to Jesus. And it's very sad, because in the process, they not only gave a false impression of Augustus, but they did of Jesus as well, because he taught pacifism, and he taught being understanding with your neighbours and not accumulating wealth and being bothered about all those sorts of things, which of course didn't satisfy the powers that be of the day, all of whom wanted to accumulate wealth and fight wars in order to protect it. And it really is quite outrageous that we give the name Christianity to a religion that, like, Bob Dylan's got a lovely song about that, with God on Your Side, where he is saying, how on earth can you have God on your side if you're on the German side and if you're on the Allies side? Obviously you can't. And it's one of those nonsenses that we've allowed to grow up. That fighting wars is part of the Christian belief system. It's not. It's part of the belief system that came in at a later date, but it wasn't there in the original. If you read the New Testament, you won't find any reference to wars. You won't find any reference to killing. You'll find plenty of references about not spending your life accumulating wealth and missing out on friendship and all the rest of it. I think it's very sad, and that was why I wrote Death of Augustus. It was simply to point out that he didn't actually die the year that he's supposed to have died, and the reason why they changed his image was because they wanted to take the religion over as the religion of Christ. In Rome, the very early illustrations of Christ, he looks like Augustus. He hasn't got a beard or anything of that sort. It was only later on they gave him a beard, because they wanted him to look as different to Augustus, who was clean-shaven, as you possibly could. Anyway, that was the first lengthy book I wrote. Life in Poetry, which is a bigger book, is an accumulation of things I wrote over 50 years now, and it was, I still think it's the most interesting of my books. The others are well worth reading to anybody who likes those sorts of subjects.
Yes, definitely. You really have like just some wealth of just a wisdom just to pass along to all of us, and and just you've been a very transformational writer throughout all this time, and you seem like you were able to wrap it all up in each book, so coming back to Bronze again, we got this Scots banker, we got this grandson of a Scots banker and a Menonese mafia boss, and as I'm thinking, and we for you to write early on Augustus, and and then the Menonese mafia boss, and so now did you have any intel on did you have to do any while you were in while you were in over in, you had some time in Rome, am I correct, or were you in did you have some time in that area? Am I correct when you wrote this book?
I've visited Florence every summer for years and years and years, yes. And quite a lot of it was written in either Rome or in Milan.
Yeah,
as well as
yeah,
Soros.
yeah. So
So
yeah, so
it's
right. Yeah, so yeah, that was the point I was making. So yeah, because I'm collecting my thoughts here. So do excuse me for interrupting you too. So yeah, so you might have had some so yeah, the for the to with the Milanese mafia boss, that concept there is pretty interesting for because was there any research you did into the Kamasina gang was there any connection with that character, with the Kamasina leader, uh the former Kamasina?
you don't get anywhere near them, I don't think. You can pick up all sorts of useful information by talking to people who are considerably lower down in the ranks than the top guys. But the portrayal I've given of the mafia boss in Milan, he is just an ordinary bloke who happens to have got an enormous amount of power because he's got so much information that is valuable to him about other people. And that's basically how these organizations work. They accumulate money that allows them to blackmail other people. And if you actually meet one of them, as I understand it, you wouldn't know them from anybody else, apart from the fact that they're extremely rich.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite interesting that we got people among us like that, and for you to be exposed to that type of people, um, you know, and having had the conversation with you on the other side, and that type of exposure to that type of people, how has that changed your your thought process about humanity, if it has at all, you know you know
I must confess, I can less and less see a distinction between crops making vast amounts of money and commercialism generally. It seems to me that they're all based on the same premise, and that is that if you can force humanity, ordinary human beings like you and me, into doing what they want, they will make money out of it. And this is why all this diversionary tactic, so that you spend your whole life doing things other than really investigating and enjoying life. It's because somewhere along the line you're paying some money to them. So you are effectively being taxed either by crooks or by industry or by the state, all of whom are taking money away from you to use in ways you would rather they didn't, mainly. I mean, I've no idea why we spend billions on space research trying to find life on other planets when we're very near the point of making life on this planet extinct. It would seem to me to make a lot more sense if they spent money with all these brilliant scientists making sure that we solve the problem of global warming. But we seem to think that it's more important to go and look for life anywhere else. If there is life anywhere else, good luck to it. But I would like to think that there was going to be life on Earth for another century or so. It doesn't look very likely.
Yeah, you really do, get that feeling too. You're so right on so many points, and I can see where the book Bronze, you know, uh, has this has a little bit of this, where his mindset and belief system is jeopardized by these powerful personal encounters, and and that can oftentimes change your whole perception, how you look at humanity, totally different. And you know it, at large too. Especially when there's so much going on in the world, and you would think that they will do things the right way when they have so many resources available, uh, that are here from stretches from here all the way around the world more than once. So it's totally ashamed, totally shameful. We that we're not learning from our past mistakes. So with that being said, as we continue to wind down here, you have worked in psychiatric hospitals, and you gotten to witness, what we can look like in our worst, at our worst, when our minds are most gone. But we do know that we still have a soul there. Yeah, and oftentimes even when our mind's gone, there's still a soul there, and still a heart there. Um, what can you most offer to the world, and what do you think your books can most offer to the world, if you can hand one to everybody?
I think the important thing is to be yourself, to really probe your own belief systems and sort out what you actually do believe, and be very respectful of what everybody else believes, because I don't think any two people think the same. I think we should all be very tolerant and understanding of others. One of the things that is at the basic root of the teachings of Jesus is that you should think for yourself and you should think about other people. And it's extraordinarily important that everything you do is done on the basis of is this as general benefit, or is this just something that's going to make me richer or more powerful? People who want to be rich and powerful have lost themselves anyway.
That's absolutely true. You really speak to what Jesus would still be saying, if he was here, in physical form, but as your book is titled, you have a book that's titled Jesus Forever Reborn. His spirit still lives on, and he still dwells in all of us, that still believes and accept him. So yeah, wow, this has been an awesome conversation. We can't thank you enough, and we greatly appreciate you, and just your influence that you are putting in all of us with your writings. So tell us where we can find the book, and just any additional things you may want to say.
Not really. I think everybody has got a creative side to them. I've tried to put mine into the books I've read and into my relationships with other people. And I think it's very sad if people don't recognize the creative element within themselves. It doesn't matter whether it's a creative element of being a carpenter or a bookkeeper or whatever. The important thing is to think things through for yourself and do what you want to do, and not what commerce and industry and states and everybody else thinks you should be doing. I think we've all got to stand up for ourselves, and if we do, we may well find that we can avoid all these climatic nonsenses that we've got. Because the moment you start thinking about how do I best serve other people, you start making so many demands on resources yourself.
Thank you so much, Colin. And your books are available online, correctly? Correct.
Yep, they're all online. You can get them from Barnes Noble, from Amazon, from any of those places. If you go to my website, which is Colin Kirk Works, you'll find them all listed, a little bit about each of them, and where you can get a copy. Okay?
Fascinating. Thank you so much. Brilliant. Just brilliant. You have definitely been a great joy here today. We appreciate all your knowledge and great wisdom that you have offered here. You have definitely been a great service here today, and continue to just be the light that continue to shine for all of us. Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Um, uh, Ladies and gentlemen, we just had a conversation with Colin Kurt. He's the author of Five Great Works on Death of Augustus, Jesus Forever Reborn, Aiden's Goldfish, Bronze, and Life in Poetry. Do take the time out to visit his website, colinkirksworks.com. I am your host, Marcus Hart. Until next time, many blessings, peace, and lots of love. Hello, Colin.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that what you wanted?